I only draw funny pictures. Or cars. I draw car stuff as well. So.
Welcome to another chapter of the Geezer Show. I'm Len Sr., your host, and today I welcome a very special guest and friend, Adrian Sinnott, a fellow cartoonist, illustrator, and author. He is a member of the Society of Illustrators in New York, and we both share membership in the Burnt Toast Gang, the Long Island, New York chapter of the National Cartoonist Society. And incidentally, Adrian is heading up that chapter today. One of the other things and his accomplishment, he's being an adjunct professor at Farmingdale, New York State College, where he gives courses in animation and computer graphics. Now I'll shut up and turn it over to our guest. Okay, Adrian, you can start filling in the blanks, starting with your earliest years in the United States.
Well, both my parents worked for the airlines, and they worked at Shannon Airport. Up until then, everything had to stop at Shannon and refuel. When the jets came out, it was not necessary anymore. My father was working for Italian Airlines, precursor to Alitalia. And they said, well, you can move to London or you can move to Rome. And he said, well, if I'm going anywhere, I'm going to New York. So he packed us all up, and we arrived at Idlewild Airport on my second birthday. Almost got sent back because they thought I had TB. Because back then they would take an X-ray before they'd let you in. And someone had gotten a thumb mark on my lung. So luckily they convinced them to do another set of X-rays, and I was fine. The earliest memories, we lived in Far Rockaway first. We were in an apartment building that was entirely Jewish, and we caused quite a ruckus when we brought a Christmas tree in, because all the other kids wanted one. So, Mom was working shift work, and she came home, in the middle of the night, went to sleep, and she woke up and heard all these unusual music and smelled smells she'd never smelled before. She thought she'd died and gone to heaven. And it was a high holy day, and so it was all these things that they'd never been exposed to before. So it was quite an introduction to New York. I guess I've always tried to be sensible. It hasn't always worked, but I've tried to be sensible. And I was going to be a geologist because I needed a job. Started college to become a geologist, and I was drawing all over my notes, and I set them in the wrong place. And I went and told my parents. They weren't terribly thrilled because they figured I'd be starving in a garret somewhere on the West Bank. So started out being a technical illustrator because that was a place where you could get a job as an artist. So drew bits of airplanes, and then went into advertising because I thought it might pay more. Worked in there for a while, and then decided to freelance, which is, I guess it's good. These days, I'm trying to do some self-published work because I realized that if I do my own book, if I sell a couple of thousand copies, I can actually make the same kind of money. Besides my own stuff, I help out the people who do the Lockhorns. I know you spoke with Bunny. But mostly I like illustrating children's books, but I do gag cartoons here or there. I've done some for some car magazines. My father-in-law he had been an amateur cartoonist when he was a kid. Came back from World War II, and he worked for Captain America for a very short time. He couldn't continue it because it was costing him more money to get there from where he lived than they were paying him. So he used to, when he retired, he started looking through everything, and he used to read this little buy and sell newspaper that I would never pay any attention to. And in it was a little notice about the cartoon group. And the Burnt Toast Gang usually didn't say when and where they met, but they did for this one. So I went in, and the first person I met was Craig Fessel, who's that piece behind your dad. And he was like, "Oh, and come meet Mort Drucker from Mad Magazine." And Mort had been my idol. I used to hide Mad under my mattress. And so that was really an incredible opportunity that just sort of appeared out of the blue. And I remember one day I brought my father-in-law into the lunch, and Len came over to me and said, "What's he doing here?" I said, "Who?" He said, "That guy over there." I said, "Well, that's my father-in-law." Len said, "He gave me my first job in New York." Yeah.
Your father-in-law, Ralph Camellis, gave me my first job, and I worked for him as an assistant art director. Then he moved to another agency, and he called me up and he said,
Right.
"I'd like you to come over here and work for me." And I ended up working at the other agency too. So he was responsible for my 2 advertising jobs in New York.
Right. When the last fellow, Mike Lynch, decided to move to New Hampshire, they voted me to take over running the chapter. And you're only supposed to do it for 2 years. Well, that was 13 years ago. But it met incredible people. And one of the things we did is we took a trip to Ireland. It was 1997. Your dad came with me.
It was wonderful.
So I wrote to the president of Ireland at the time, who was the first woman president of Ireland, Mary Robinson. And I said, "Can we come visit?" And she said, "Well, I can't do it this year, but I'll do it next year." And that was 1997 when your dad came. And it was really special for me because I was standing in Aras an Uachtaráin, which is basically Gaelic for the president's house. And it's in Phoenix Park in Dublin. And I was being introduced to the president. And my father grew up as an orphan in Dublin. And all these older guys in the cartoon group, they had a much longer experience of that than I did. They grew up, learning to appreciate things, learning to, things you worked for, you appreciate more than things that were handed to you. And they had such a difficult life. Their parents went through World War I, and now they were dealing with this pandemic. They went through the Spanish flu. They were really resilient. All of the cartoonists, especially in the Burnt Toast Gang, they were immediately people you'd known all your life. There was that kind of friendship between them. They would share anything. If you said, "Well, how did you do that?" they would show you. They wouldn't say, "That's a secret, I'm sorry." It was an unusual time and it was really incredible for me because these were people that I admired. And when there's the old saying, "Never meet your heroes," which can be true, but not in this case. This was, like I said, Mort Drucker, who did Mad Magazine, did all the movie spoofs. I couldn't think of a nicer man. When I got introduced to him, it was like he'd known me forever. And he wasn't like that just because he had to. He was like that because that's who he was. It was anybody who he met. If a young artist came up to him and said, "Would you look at my work?" he was thrilled to look at it. And he looked at it with a real interest.
As you say, there was a camaraderie that you wouldn't think existed. And the one thing that you emphasized, if they saw something and they could help you with it, they did it.
Yeah. There's been a long tie between the Cartoonists and the Society of Illustrators. Some of the founding members of the Society of Illustrators were actually cartoonists. Russell Patterson, I think Rube Goldberg, Norman Rockwell was a member, J.C. Leyendecker was a member, N.C. Wyeth. I mean, the list of talent from that group is earth-shattering.
You mentioned Rube Goldberg. Janice and I had the pleasure of going to his apartment. I had a friend of mine in PR that was doing a lot of publicity for Rube. we went to his house. It was lovely. And then we went to a restaurant and had dinner with him. And he was a storyteller and such a wonderful guy. He died in his 80s, but I'll always remember.
Those guys, they live such incredible lives, especially like Rube Goldberg. A lot of people don't realize that he would have been treated the same as a movie star is treated today.
Yeah.
Those early cartoonists they had the same kind of following, the same kind of draw that a movie star would have today. There's a not great movie. It's a good rainy day movie called How to Murder Your Wife. Now, when I took that out of the library, my wife went out and took a book out of the library called How to Murder the Man of Your Dreams. So we were even. But in How to Murder Your Wife, it's Jack Lemmon, Terry Thomas, and Verna Lisi, and he is portraying a very famous cartoonist, and he gets accused of murdering Verna Lisi. But it was that thing, he was in 450 newspapers from Maine to Honolulu, they say in the movie. And that really was the kind of draw the cartoonists had. They really did have that kind of notoriety. And there's a tie with the NCS in there. They used to meet at the Lambs Club. And Hy Eisman, who's drawn Popeye for many years, Hy was at the bar. And someone comes over and taps him on the shoulder, and he turns around, and it was Jack Lemmon. And he and Terry Thomas were there because they were filming this movie, and they wanted to talk to real cartoonists about, playing this part of a cartoonist. Because of being that same class of movie stars that they got into cars.
Adams was quoted as saying, the most important thing in life are woman, booze, and cars, in that order.
I think I put the car first because you don't want to mix the booze in the car.
Yeah, I know.
Cars are all my brother's fault. He came home with a 1959 Triumph. I learned how to drive standard in that. From then on, I was stuck. And there's been cars around here since. There's an art to a car. A lot of people don't think of it that way. They see them as transportation. And there's a lot of enjoyment with the right kind of car. And the right kind of car doesn't necessarily mean the one that is perfect or does the things, does everything the way you want it.
Do you attend the car shows?
I used to. I don't like entering as much as going and looking. I think it's because I'm really not into worrying about the car being perfect. I like to drive my cars. You have to live life doing the things that make you happy, but you should do it while thinking about other people at the same time. If it makes you happy and it hurts somebody else, you shouldn't do it. But if it makes you happy and makes other people happy, then it's perfect. That's the thing you really want to do. Because we're only here for a short time. There's no reason to be miserable. But I think being happy is more important than making money. I think being kind and being happy is what everyone should strive for.
I hope they lift the restrictions and we get a vaccine.
Oh, yeah.
Because I want to hang in so I can get back to New York.
Please. Yeah. The sooner the better. It's always great to talk to you.
Thank you so much.
We could go for hours.